Hello again, everybody. This is Joe Larsen, and you're watching the 505 on Racing Show. Welcome to episode number 250, celebrating 5 years of the 505 on Racing Show at Inravio.com. To my right, your left, we got Bob Fine, an announcer and PR at the New Riverhead Raceway here on Long Island. Bobby, welcome.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. 5 years, 250 shows. And they said it wouldn't last.
I thought I was just doing this for a little while. Here we are.
There you go. Hey.
I know, Bob, you have a busy schedule, so I want to let you know, and I want to be I appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, listen, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to see Chuck and Bonnie again. And, of course, we always see each other, but it's great to be here. So fire away. Let's have some fun.
Well, it's New Riverhead Raceway. You with Barbara and Jim Cromedy, great people, great racing people.
Yep.
It was time. They were in their 80s. They didn't have the hunger and the drive that they once had years ago, but they held on as long as they could because they wanted it to stay a racetrack. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head, Joe. I mean, their whole goal was to keep racing alive on Long Island, and in my estimation, they probably were around about 5 more years than they really had planned. I don't think their game plan and life plan was to be promoting a racetrack at 80 and 79 years old, so they were steadfast in that whoever bought the property was going to keep it a racetrack. And, that's a very, very slim market. And there were 3 candidates, and at the end of the day, Eddie and Connie Partridge, along with Tom Gatz, bought the property. But in the long run, Barbara and Jim did what they said they were going to do and what they promised themselves. They were going to keep it a racetrack. They wanted the new generations of children that we see at the track all the time to have this for the future. I mean, it's very easy to sell out to a box store or a big chain or a car dealership and probably make more money. Mm-hmm. So the decision was with the heart. They did it for the race fans, and God bless them for that.
I'll tell you, and I've had dealings with the Cromedies over the years, probably over the last 40 years, and their heart and soul was into this.
And listen, Barbara and Jim not only gave their heart, their soul, their money, but at times their body. We had an incident back in the late 80s where, sadly enough, Mrs. Cromedy was severely injured. Mm-hmm. At Riverhead Raceway during a racing event, and you know what? It never deterred her spirit, her determination. They kept moving forward. Jim's illnesses and hip replacement. Listen, they were at the track with each other, and if one of them couldn't be there, the other one was there. And as the great circus promoter said, the show must go on, and it always went on.
Absolutely. You've been in this business how long, Bob?
Well.
You need a calculator?
No, I probably need an abacus, but listen, I've been a fan since the early 70s. My mom, God rest her soul, she got me involved with this. She saw an ad for 100-car demolition derby, and off the ice of Speedway we went, and I just fell in love with it. The coaches, the sedans, the modifieds, the figure eights, 40 modifieds, 80 figure eight cars. 100-car demo. Nobody ever really counted those cars, but and then I got involved with the mini modifieds. And long story short, my senior year of high school, the late great Joe Santiago, mini modified driver, Jim Hendrickson Jr. and a couple others, Jack Scott, Joe Aragon. I said, we really could use an announcer. The announcers are not really doing our guys justice. We're just a side act. So I started doing the announcing and writing some press for the Long Island mini modifieds. Wrote a column for Illustrated Speedway News with the late Jack Schwartz, and the Cromedies noticed my talents when they started leasing the Ice of Speedway in 1977. I didn't get on board with them until '79, and been doing it ever since.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. Seen a lot of great things, a lot of positive things, and unfortunately some sad things along the way. I mean, we've all been there, but. You can't replace the lifetime of memories and the friendships and to me, racing people, they cover the entire spectrum of the demographic in this country, from guys who scrape together a couple dollars to go racing to millionaires and everything in between, and the personalities. And They're just the greatest people in the world, racing people. Their hearts, their souls, and when the chips are down, they're there. They come through for each other. They might go against each other. They might have a couple yelling matches and pushing, shoving matches against each other. But if one is down, the other's there to help them.
I'm sure you remember that 1996 wreck that I had.
Oh, yeah.
And a couple of weeks before that, Kenny Hyde and I had a big battle. We had to sit in the grandstands for a couple of weeks, and they made our pockets a little lighter. But the first guy that came to my house was the late Kenny Hyde.
Listen, and that's what it's about, and that was the kind of guy Kenny Hyde, God rest his soul, was. But it's a hint into what the entire sport is at all levels. Short track level. I'm sure when you get into the high-end champagne and caviars, they're not as quick to help each other. Maybe not in Formula One or Sprint Cup or IndyCar, but at the local short tracks, the home tracks, and NASCAR, everybody's there to pitch in for each other. I mean, this past year, Chris Turbish, David Royce, who had a bit of an argument the year before at the Turkey Derby. Chris Turbish is lending David Royce parts this past summer because at the end of the day, they're all in the same racket.
Got that right. I know, and you said that even at the highest level, in 2006, my mom passed away.
Right.
I was at Daytona, and I had driven down, and Mike Helton offered me the NASCAR jet to get me home.
Yep.
Because the jet was going back and forth to New York every day anyway.
And not many people know this story, and I might be talking out of school, but I'm going to take a flyer on it when the late, great Tom Baldwin Sr. passed away. A lot of those who came up from North Carolina were on a plane that Tony Stewart made available to them to come up and pay their respects to Tiger Tom Baldwin. So, yes, it does.
And it is a big family. What we do in racing is a big family. And like big families, you're not always agreeing.
Nope.
Sometimes you're arguing.
Nope.
But like you said, when the chips are down.
There's divorces, there's remarriages, there's everything, and it's how the sport works. And during the summer, we spend more time, especially the guys who work on the cars and own the cars and drive the cars. They spend more time in those shops that are freezing in the winter and, hot in the summer. And while everybody's having a cookout or at a Little League game, they're working on these cars. It's a labor of love. It's a labor of loyalty. And there's no more loyal athletes, participants in the world than those that race.
Oh, without a doubt. And there's no secret. I wasn't even at best a mid-pack guy. I was one of those guys that showed up a week, had a good time. It was like my golf game. I didn't care if I shot a 150 or a 90. I had a good time, had a burger and a beer after, and that's what it was all about.
That's the backbone of the sport, though. If the sport was all made up of front runners, there'd be nobody looking to come along and break into the game, and you have to start somewhere, and for you, opportunities came up in other departments of the business. To figure it, and of course, after that crash in '96, and I don't think I'd ever get back in a car either, but you did.
I did.
But you were a figure eight driver, so I don't even.
That's a whole different breed.
I'm figure eight Bob, but I thought that was a little unique. But hey, listen, look, guys get hurt and they go back in these cars. I couldn't tell you how many times Billy Park broke his wrist in a modified, and Timmy Solomito's had a couple banged up wrists, but this is what they do.
This is all we know.
Yeah, and that's the truth, and I'm first on that list.
So. And going back, you've seen a lot of great guys race.
Oh,
seen a lot of divisions. You've seen a lot of change over the years. What's the biggest change that you've seen since 1979 to 2016?
Oh man, there's been so many changes, but the sport still remains at its grassroots level the same. And I think it's kind of the scenario. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And I think that's the great thing about the sport. As I said, when I went to Ice with Spear that first time in the early 70s, there were the sedans, there were the coaches, there were the coupes. And the biggest highlight was the Pinto revolution that Bob Junkers started. And I'll tell you what, great changes along the way, but at its core, the sport stays the same. There's a lot more money spent these days, but if you do it per capita as to what the guys were spending back then, it may not be too far off. But I think the greatest change I've seen over the years, I'd have to say the modifieds. They know it's a division now that, and in all levels, in any touring series, the cars are pretty much all the same. It really comes down to driver ability. Back in the day, a lot of races were won in the shop. I mean, all you have to do is look at Ricky and Charlie Jazumbach with, the right side coupe and putting a whole drive line on. All that ingenuity is kind of out of the game. So that's probably the biggest change. The guys today have to read the rule book. Back in the day, they read between the lines of the rule book. So that's the biggest change, I think.
And and it's funny you say that because I was a tech inspector on the modified tour, the old Nationwide teams, was now Xfinity.
Let me interrupt for a while.
Yeah.
Oh.
Congratulations on 250 shows.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for coming down.
Oh, wow.
For those who don't know,
I
this
got
is
you
Chuck
the small
Schultz.
cake.
Yeah. He's the president here at the Inravio, Ultimate Media Group, and a former racer as well. Mr. Big.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Joe, for everything you do. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
This is
All right,
great.
Chuck.
This is nice. It's like I was saying, when we started teching cars, and years ago, we basically looked at the safety stuff.
Okay.
Then all of a sudden, they hand me a ruler, and it's off by 1/8 of an inch. You're no good. And I was like, "You're kidding me."
Well, I think a big testament to that is now at the highest level at the inspection, there's a laser machine.
Yeah. They use that on the modified tour too.
But yet there are some car chiefs and crew chiefs there that still find a way.
Oh yeah. Well, like you said earlier, you couldn't read between the lines so much, but now when you're reading between the lines, it's a fine line.
There's not as much space as there used to be.
Exactly. Late Bobby Lane said that to me. He goes, "How many lines you see on that page?" I said 24. He goes, "I see 48."
Yeah.
And he did. He knew Bobby Lane.
Yeah.
He could play with the rules. He could play with the rules big time. Now, going back over the years, ISO Speedway, Riverhead Raceway, that's not the only places where you hung your hat. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, listen, fortunately for me, when I started with the mini modifieds, it allowed me to travel quite a bit. ISO Speedway had Sonny Granger, Freeport Stadium had the late Roger Stokes and Kevin Van Meter, who, of course, still does the Golden Gloves boxing on Madison. He's the ring announcer, actually, for those events for the Daily News. Riverhead Raceway had Tom Gallen. So, I wasn't fitting in anywhere, so it was time to hit the road, and Dan Meservey from the New England Mini Modified Association invited me up to do some shows in New England, and, that was a labor of love. There wasn't any dollars involved. And me and my little Fiat 131, I've been to places like Monadnock Speedway, Westboro Speedway, Seekonk Speedway, Lee Speedway, Thompson. I don't think I ever did a show at Stafford because the minis never ran there, and that could be on the bucket list. But down in New Jersey, New Egypt Speedway, and it was still asphalt. Wall Stadium, the Atlantic City Speedway. Now, not many people even remember that place. But that's where Tony Siscone started his racing career. And I'm sure I'm missing a few. I think my favorite of all of those places, though, was Westboro. Dick Williams was the promoter. He's now in cahoots with Jim Schaefer in the Tri-Track Series. What a nicer man you'll not meet. But Westboro Speedway, it was nestled in the middle of a business district on Route 9. And when you went into 1 and 2 and you came off turn number 2, there was this dip. And it really threw the mini modifieds for a loop. But nobody drove that track better than guys like Jeff Fuller and the late Ronnie Bouchard and Kenny Bouchard. Charging Charlie Jazumbach had a handle on that place, too. So that was my favorite place of all of them.
Now, you didn't only go to the announcer's booth. I remember you walked around with flags at a certain racetrack.
And it was under negative circumstances, but I was going to be co-announcing at the New Egypt Speedway with Earl Krause one summer at the behoost of Bob O'Rourke. And, of course, when Bob asked, it was like the Army. You were kind of being volunteered. But, I figured I needed the experience. It was a Friday night gig. I had some vacation time built up in my job, and I said, why not? Well, sadly, Dutch Miller, who was supposed to be the starter, had passed away from injuries in an automobile accident. And O'Rourke called me up, and he goes, "Bob, I need you to do something different at New Egypt." And I said, "Oh, okay. What did you need me to do?" He goes, "I need you to be the starter." And I said a lot of words that I probably can't say here. And, of course, O'Rourke, in his traditional way, talked me into it. Ray Mortuano got me up on the flag stand at Islip, had me up there for a practice. That night, Billy Park blew a motor coming underneath me in practice. I had the yellow flag out, and I was waving the other flag to tell the guys there was oil, and Ray says, "You got it. See ya." And I spent one summer down there with Bob O'Rourke. That was quite the crew of characters that went down in the late Jim Kerwin's orange station wagon. You remember that big one with all the lettering on it? It was me, Jimmy Kerwin, Mike Kalanoff, and Lisa Tyler. Every Friday. The laughs, the stories.
Oh, sure.
And I'll tell you what, being in the flag stand, that's a lot of fun. I mean, your son did it, Joe Jr., and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I had a great time, and Bill Bryce Sr. was the chief steward back then over there, and Jimmy Garback had the place, and Earl Krause was the announcer. We just had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs.
You know, you look back and things like that, it was fun.
It was fun, and for me, it's still fun. There's something about, to this day, even as involved you get in the business, and sometimes people trying to can sour you a little bit on things. You make that right off Route 58 onto that driveway, and whether it's the political campaign or your team that you root for being in the playoffs or business pressures or you just kind of, the outside world kind of takes a back seat. And for the hours that you're there, whether they're 5, 6, 10, 8, doesn't matter, you're immersed in it. And then when the show's over, you get up to the top of the road and you make the left back on Route 58 or whichever direction you go, and it's like, okay, I'm back in the real world now. It's an oasis in the desert. I've always said that.
No matter which racetrack you go to.
Any local short track, Stafford, Waterford, Wall Stadium, New Egypt, Dirt, whatever.
All right. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have the results from the Formula One event that was held this weekend when we come back.
I actually watched some of that race.
Hey, this is Chris Jake, and if Inravio.com spots you at an event wearing this bracelet, they will give you $100.
Village Music Shop of Mastic. 1-800-HEY-DUDE. Your full-service store with personalized attention, school band instrument rentals and sales, music instruction on all instruments for all styles and age groups, for guitars, drums, amplifiers, PA systems, and accessories. It's Village Music Shop. 1495 Montauk Highway in Mastic. Call 1-800-HEY-DUDE or go to villagemusicshop.com. Village Music Shop of Mastic. 1-800-HEY-DUDE. Your full-service store with personalized attention, school band instrument rentals and sales, music instruction on all instruments for all styles and age groups, for guitars, drums, amplifiers, PA systems, and accessories. It's Village Music Shop. 1495 Montauk Highway in Mastic. Call 1-800-HEY-DUDE or go to villagemusicshop.com.
I love that shot. Hey, we're back. Hey, at Formula One, in Phoenix, Arizona, Scott Dixon, the reigning Verizon IndyCar champion, won the Desert Diamond West Valley Phoenix Grand Prix. Dixon's win, his 39th of his IndyCar career, ties him with Al Unser for fourth on the all-time list of victories. The victory also gave Dixon another record, 12 consecutive seasons with a victory. And that's series. That's a lot.
Yeah, he's quite the wheelman. And was the first time they were in Phoenix in quite a while.
Yeah, a long time. It was almost 10 years, I believe it was.
Yep.
The rundown, Scott Dixon, as I said, was the winner, followed by Simon Pagnagon. Will Power was third. Tony Kanaan was fourth. Graham Rahal was fifth. Joseph Newgarden was sixth. Matt Chilton was seventh. Sebastian Bordeaux was eighth. Juan Pablo Montoya, we all know who from the NASCAR days, was ninth. And Russ Hunter Ray was 10th. The pole was taken by Helio Castroneves, and he finished 11th. So, during the break, somebody whispered in my ear
Oh, boy.
about a time that you were in a figure-8 car, not as a driver,
No.
but as a passenger. Tell us about that.
Well, as you know, I was a regular at the Safer meetings back in the 80s, and the transition from ICE to Riverhead was made, and the figure-8 drivers couldn't understand why guys would run in different divisions that ran for less money. So the Safer group at that time used to have their meetings at the Firehouse Pub there in St. James, and Pulio Brothers, and we go there, and of course, my partner in crime, Mike Kalanoff, back in the day, we may have had a few adult beverages prior to and during the meeting, and the suggestion was made to put a seat in a figure-8 car.
A passenger seat?
Passenger seat, not a driver's seat, correct. And Roger Maynard said he was more than willing to do it, and they were going to try to get a blunderbuss driver to do it. So, you know, Kalanoff's giving me the elbow. Fine, why don't you do it? And giving me the elbow. And all of a sudden I said, you know what? I said, if there's not a blunderbuss driver that'll do it, I'll go for the ride. Well, it's one of those things where it sounded like a great idea when you said it. So now I go home and I'm sitting there and go, oh, man, what did I say? Gee whiz. And I said, it's all right, because Bob O'Rourke will never let that happen. Well, I called O'Rourke, and O'Rourke must have gotten a call already. He goes, I think that's a great idea. Well, Roger Maynard shows up at Riverhead Raceway that night with a passenger seat, the 5-point harness, all the safety items in the Barrasso & Sons Mason Supply number 28, and off I went. And the races back then were 15 laps. This is before they morphed into 20, and now they're back to 15. Yep. And they throw the green flag, and we drove right into the back of that Maverick at the time. The old Chris Young Maverick was driven by Jerry Bowes. We hit that thing a ton, and the hood came up. But you know, we kept going, and there was a caution about halfway through the race, and Roger looked at me and goes, you want to get out? I said, oh, no. But, you know, I never drove a race car before. The belts are loosening. I'm sitting there. And, of course, there was one time Paul Specht hit one of those big orange highway cones they had so you guys wouldn't cut the infield. And it came right across the front of the cone. I actually grabbed Roger's arm, and I almost jerked the wheel and put us on the infield. And I can't thank Roger Maynard enough for that. And, you know, Bob O'Rourke, he got even with me because, you know, we played a lot of gags on Bob over the years. So Bob got even with me. And it was great. And I tell you what. Yeah, I'll tell you, the highlight of my racing life as far as the announcing event. And Joe Saraceno went up into the booth with Mike Kalanoff. Well, there was no booth then. Actually, it was the trailer on top of the flatbed. Right. So he sat on the trailer stairs with Mike Kalanoff to do the show that day. You know, those are the things that you look back and you're like, what were we thinking? But you had a good time. And Kevin has that on his Need for Speed shows. And I'm sitting home one Monday night when they were still on my cable system. Now it's just limited to Woodbury. And I'm just sitting there, and I said, I'm in that car that night, you know, and I call my wife, and she goes, are you nuts? But my wife is not a racing enthusiast, so you know, supports everything I do, but she's like, you must have been nuts. So, and that's key, you know, you hit the nail right in the head with, I call it spousal support, because there's women that drive today. Without that, this ain't happening. No, and the wives, the girlfriends, the family members that sacrifice us to do what we do. And you know, again, I go back to what I do. I'm not going to say it's fairly easier, but it's easier than the guys that have to spend the time in the garage. And if you have a bad wreck, you know, that time in the garage starts Sunday so you can get the car apart, evaluate, and repair, and be ready for the next race. So the wives, the understanding spouses and girlfriends, they really drive the sport. And you know, for you, you're not the typical announcer. I've been to over 80 racetracks in North America, and most of the announcers, they go, they announce, they do a little PR. You're the type of guy that gets involved with people during the week, goes to meetings with them, helps them get sponsors. I kind of, you know, as the years have gone on, and Bob O'Rourke kind of encouraged me to do this a little bit. You become a liaison somewhat. Because you're the PR guy for the racetrack, and of course the thing is to promote the racers and the promoters and this, that, but you have to be the ear for some of the competitors. I understand them. Many of them I used to watch their fathers race, if not their grandfathers, and you try to understand what they're telling you. And I go back to some of the management people. I mean, we went through it. Yeah, you know, the guy's going through a little something, and try to give them some background that they, you know, may not see. And I try to help the competitors. I try to encourage the competitors not to act crazy sometimes. You get more with honey than vinegar. Some guys listen, some guys don't.
Took me a long time to learn that.
Yeah.
As you know.
It took me, listen, you're not the only one. Excuse me.
And you said something. You're seeing some third-generation drivers now.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Old.
Old.
But thrilled at the same time to be around and to enjoy it. You know, you see Eddie Brunhustle III. I mean, when I first went to ISA Speedway, you know, Eddie Sr., God rest his soul, was in the Artie King's 333 coupe, and George Sr., God rest his soul too. I mean, I guess I should stop saying that because you get the point. Yep. Was in his #1 Mustang that with the checkered flags along the #1, and the brothers Park were there. And but you know, now we have George Brunhustle III, a multi-time Southern Modified Tour champion in NASCAR. Eddie Brunhustle III. I mean, he's got a growing family, so his racing has got cut back a little bit. But
Vinny Biondolillo?
Vinny Biondolillo. I mean, Papa Joe and the late Joe Biondolillo Jr. and the kid wins a feature event this year as a teenager. I mean, that's just...
That was unheard of back in the day.
Listen, there were some great drivers along the way. I mean, it took them 20 years to win a feature. I mean, just making the feature at ISA Speedway with the likes of Harback, Jazumbag, Hendrickson, Kempster in the field. You know, for a new guy coming along, and some guys packed it in after all, said, well, go golfing, go bowling, you know.
Yeah. It was a tough time.
It was a tough racket back then.
It was, and it's still tough now, just in a different aspect.
It's tough now because everybody's so equal, and you have to find that magical setup, that magical formula, that magical driving style. I mean, I think the greatest thing for guys that drive these modifieds today and race cars at Riverhead Raceway is the feeder system that the go-karts provide. Oh. If you watch the go-kart drivers like Tommy Rogers Jr. and J.R. Bertuccio back in the day, Eddie Brunhustle III, and you know, they just have a way of getting the car entry into 3, letting the car kind of slide into the middle of the corner and getting right back to the gas, and it's really, really amazing.
And a lot of those go-kart kids went from like go-karts and champ karts to modifieds.
They skipped all the middle divisions, but there are some that are coming through the ranks as well. Everybody has a different strategy. I mean, Kyle Soper spent some time in the Legends before he won Rookie of the Year this past year in the modifieds at Riverhead, and it's a great, and our Enduro system is still a great feeder. It's produced a lot of blunderbuss drivers that have now moved into what was the Charger division. Steve Mastro, Rookie of the Year last year. Figure 8 drivers. Brian Quilliam started in the Enduros, and figure 8 division going to be on the rebound this year. This is a lot. You know, the rebuilding of the facility and the commitment that Eddie, Connie Partridge, and Tom Gatz have furthered. You know, they bought the facility, kept it a racetrack, and we really hit upon that earlier. But their commitment is just continuing to grow with the improvements they've made. They tell me, and I said to you in the green room that I'm going to be like that kid that doesn't want to know what he's getting for Christmas. That first practice day is going to be the first time I lay eyes on the facility. And I'm kind of, at this point, doing that on purpose because I want to see what's under the Christmas tree.
Exactly. Hey, we're going to take a break. We have 2 of our guests who just arrived, and thanks to Long Island traffic. And we'll be back with our 2 guests.